Keanu Reeves, one of the most admired actors in Hollywood, quietly walked into a luxury car dealership to him. It was just another day, but what was about to happen would change everything. And when the truth about him came to light, the consequences would be more than surprising. They would be unforgettable. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. It was a bright morning in Los Angeles, with the blue sky stretching endlessly. Keanu Reeves walked the streets, dressed simply in a black leather jacket and worn jeans. He moved quietly, his calm presence standing out as a few people recognized him. Unlike many celebrities, Keanu never let fame change him. He smiled at a fan, thanked someone for a kind word, and kept walking at his own pace. Halfway through his walk, he stopped at his usual cafe, a place he had visited for years. He greeted the barista by name, just like always. "Good morning, Oliver. How's everything?" "Going well, Keanu." "The usual?" "Yes, please." As he waited for his coffee, his mind wandered. For months, he had been searching for something special. It wasn't just a random idea, but a dream that brought together his love for cars and his wish to do something meaningful. Maybe a rare classic car, something he could restore and use for a good cause, a donation or a tribute. With his coffee in hand, he continued his walk. There was a dealership he had in mind, known for its rare and luxury cars. Maybe, just maybe, he would find what he was looking for there. When Keanu stepped inside, the dealership was everything he expected. Shiny floors, expensive cars, and the scent of new leather in the air. Well-dressed employees moved around, helping wealthy clients dressed in designer suits and expensive jewelry. Keanu in his simple clothes went mostly unnoticed. Mostly. A few people glanced at him, whispered to each other, but he ignored them. His focus was on one thing, a car in the back of the showroom, a rare model from another era. Its sleek curves, flawless paint, and unique design immediately caught his attention. Determined, Keanu walked up to a salesman who was busy on his phone. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this car?" he asked politely. The salesman barely looked up. "Hang on, I'll get someone," he muttered before walking away without a second glance. Keanu watched him leave, his expression calm, but there was a slight change in his face, a tiny crease in his brow that showed he was starting to feel uncomfortable. Even so, he stayed where he was, looking at the car, admiring every detail. Around him, the whispers grew louder. "Does he even know where he is?" someone murmured. "He doesn't look like he can afford anything here," another added. Keanu heard them, but he pretended not to. Instead, he rubbed his chin, a small habit he had when he was thinking. He didn't react. Not yet. He simply stood there, still focused on the car that had drawn him in. A few minutes later, the manager finally arrived. His name was Richard, a tall man with a stiff posture and sharp eyes. He walked toward Keanu with firm, deliberate steps, as if trying to show his authority. Stopping just a few steps away, he crossed his arms and gave a smile that felt more like a challenge than a friendly greeting. "Interested in this model?" Richard asked, his tone almost mocking. "Yes, it's an impressive car. I'd like to know more about it," Keanu replied calmly. Richard gave him a long, slow look, taking in his faded jeans and worn leather jacket. He raised an eyebrow, as if surprised that someone dressed like this would even think about buying such a car. "Interesting," Richard muttered sarcastically. "This is one of our most exclusive models. Very few people ever get to see one, let alone own it." Keanu remained steady, but the tension in the room was growing. Richard took a small step to the side, almost as if trying to block him from getting closer to the car. "You do realize this car costs more than some houses in Beverly Hills, right? It's not something just anyone can afford." Keanu frowned slightly but kept his voice polite. "I'm aware. That's why I'm here, because I'm interested. Could you tell me more about it?" Richard let out a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it. Crossing his arms again, he leaned slightly forward. "Look, I don't know how else to say this, but these cars are meant for a certain kind of buyer, people who truly understand luxury." He paused, then added with a smirk, "And with all due respect, you don't exactly fit that profile." Keanu took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the discomfort was turning into something closer to frustration. "Profile?" he repeated, keeping his tone neutral. Yes, profile, Richard said, emphasizing the word. Our cars aren't just vehicles. They're symbols of success, wealth, and exclusivity. And honestly, you don't seem like the type who... He gestured at Keanu's clothes dramatically. The room fell silent. Some employees stopped what they were doing to watch, while others pretended not to listen. Keanu didn't answer right away. He simply looked at Richard, as if carefully choosing his next words. Interesting how you think you can judge someone just by what they're wearing. That says more about you than it does about me, he finally said, his voice still calm but firm. Richard's eyes narrowed, clearly annoyed by the response. He stepped closer, invading Keanu's personal space, lowering his voice but keeping the same rude tone. Listen, buddy, I see people like you all the time. They come in, look at the cars, dream a little, and then leave without spending a dime. If you're just here to pretend, don't waste my time. Keanu didn't move, but something in his posture changed. He wasn't just being patient anymore. There was a quiet determination in his eyes. And what if I'm not here to dream? He asked simply. Richard let out a short laugh and shook his head, as if the question was ridiculous. Then I'd say you're in the wrong place. This dealership is for people who can afford these cars, people with money and status. And honestly, you don't look like you have either. The atmosphere grew tense and uncomfortable. Keanu looked at Richard for a moment, his frustration turning into something deeper, an understanding of exactly what kind of person he was dealing with. He gave a small smile, not out of joy, but as if he had seen this kind of behavior before. Funny, I always thought real luxury was treating people with respect. Maybe you should think about that, Keanu said, his voice calm but sharp. The tension in the room was obvious. Employees and customers nearby were no longer pretending not to watch. Richard, now clearly angry, stood his ground. His voice became sharper, as if he needed to win this argument to prove something. People like you only come here to waste our time, Richard said sarcastically. This isn't a playground, and it's definitely not a place for dreamers in worn-out jackets with empty pockets. Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying Richard with a steady gaze. He took a deep breath before replying, carefully choosing his words. It's interesting how you talk about wasting time when you're so focused on judging people by their clothes instead of who they really are. Maybe you should think about what truly matters. Richard narrowed his eyes, his face turning red with frustration. He stepped closer, invading Keanu's personal space. Oh, I know exactly what matters, Richard snapped. And it's definitely not life lessons from someone who thinks they belong here. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Keanu didn't move. He held his ground, his gaze locked onto Richard's. The lack of reaction only made Richard angrier. His temper finally boiled over, and he lost control. You don't tell me what to do, Richard shouted, suddenly raising his fist as if to threaten or even hit Keanu. But Keanu reacted quickly. With calm precision, he caught Richard's fist in midair. His grip was firm but controlled, not aggressive, just enough to stop him. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Richard stood there, shocked that his attempt had been stopped so easily. The entire showroom fell silent, all eyes on them. Keanu looked Richard straight in the eye, his expression steady. He wasn't angry, but his voice carried a quiet strength when he spoke. The anger you're feeling has nothing to do with me. Maybe you should look inside yourself and figure that out before taking it out on others. Then, just as calmly, Keanu released Richard's fist and stepped back. The manager took a step back too, stunned and speechless. Richard was clearly shaken, but he tried to hide his nervousness by standing tall and stiff. Keanu adjusted his jacket, took a step back, and gave Richard one last look. Respect doesn't cost anything, but for some people, it seems harder to find than any car in this place. Without waiting for a response, Keanu turned and walked toward the exit. The showroom remained completely silent, except for the sound of his steady footsteps on the polished floor. Employees and customers stood frozen, some still holding their breath, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Then Keanu noticed something. A young man standing in the corner of the dealership was holding up his phone. He had been recording the entire scene. Keanu paused for a brief moment, locking eyes with the young man, who looked both nervous and determined. The man gave Keanu a small nod, a silent gesture of support. Keanu responded with a faint smile, barely noticeable, before walking out through the glass doors and disappearing into the bright Los Angeles sunlight. Inside the dealership, Richard struggled to regain his composure, but the heavy silence and the judging stares from the employees made it clear. Something had changed. The video captured by the young man wouldn't stay hidden for long. By the next morning, the whole world knew what had happened. The young man had uploaded the video to social media, and within hours it went viral. Thousands of people shared the footage, outraged by how Keanu Reeves had been treated. The contrast was undeniable. A humble, respected actor being humiliated by an arrogant manager. The video showed Richard ignoring Keanu, making rude comments and then trying to intimidate him. But the turning point came when Richard attempted to strike Keanu, only to be stopped effortlessly. One line from the video stood out: "Respect doesn't cost anything, but it seems rarer than any car here." That sentence spread like wildfire. It appeared in posts, memes, and even newspaper headlines. The impact was immediate, and the consequences for Richard and the dealership were unavoidable. Headlines all over the internet exploded with the story. The comments were relentless. "How can anyone treat Keanu Reeves like this? He's one of the kindest and most humble people in Hollywood. That manager thinks he's better than everyone else. What a disgrace to the dealership." Keanu, as always, handling arrogance with grace. Absolute legend. This should be a lesson. Never judge people by their appearance. Entertainment blogs and news outlets quickly picked up the story. It wasn't just about disrespecting a customer. It was about disrespecting one of the most respected actors in the world. The public not only defended Keanu, but also criticized the elitist and prejudiced attitudes often found in luxury businesses. At the dealership, the fallout was immediate. Their social media pages were flooded with angry comments demanding apologies. People from all over the world called for boycotts and insisted that the manager should be fired. Richard, the manager, tried to explain himself, but every excuse made things worse. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't recognize Mr. Reeves at first, and my actions were misinterpreted," he claimed. But no one believed him. The public outrage was unstoppable. Employees at the dealership, worried about their jobs, began speaking to the press anonymously. "Richard has always treated people like that. It didn't matter if they were rich or not. He always acted like he was better than everyone," one worker revealed. This only made things worse for the dealership. They lost major clients and sales dropped sharply. No one wanted to be associated with a business that had such a bad reputation. While the world kept talking about the incident, Keanu stayed silent. He wasn't the type to seek revenge or make a big deal out of things. Sitting at home, surrounded by the simple life he loved, he thought deeply about what had happened. He knew this problem wasn't just about him. Judging people by their looks, status, or money happened everywhere, and he didn't want this to be just another viral story that would soon be forgotten. So he decided to do something about it. Talking to a close friend, he said, "The video is out there, and people are reacting. But I don't want this to just be another scandal. I want to make real change." "And how are you going to do that?" his friend asked. Keanu smiled slightly, his eyes full of determination. "I'll handle it my way." He knew what he had to do. He had to go back to that dealership, not for revenge, but to turn this situation into something meaningful. As he hung up the phone, his mind wandered back to the car. He still wanted it, but now it was more than just a car. It was a symbol of the lesson he wanted to teach. "I need to go back," he thought. The only question was, what would he do when he got there? Days later, the video was still everywhere, and Keanu Reeves' name remained a trending topic. Yet, as always, he stayed out of the spotlight. He didn't make any public statements. But he knew this story needed a real ending, one that mattered. That afternoon, Keanu walked back into the same car dealership. There was no big announcement, no security, and no cameras following him. Just him, calm and quiet as always. But this time, things were different. Everyone in the dealership recognized him immediately. Employees froze the moment he stepped inside. Some looked nervous, others embarrassed. Richard, the manager, stood behind the counter, his face pale. The confidence he had before was gone, replaced with hesitation. The dealership, once busy and full of energy, now felt strangely empty. It was clear that the massive boycott was taking a toll. Keanu walked over to the car that had caught his eye before. He placed his hand on it, running his fingers across the surface. studying its details. But this time, the real tension wasn't in the car, it was in the room. He could feel Richard watching him, his eyes filled with fear and regret. Finally, Richard gathered the courage to step forward. His voice was low and uncertain. "Mr. Reeves, I want to apologize for what happened. I think we got off on the wrong foot, and I hope we can start over. Maybe I could show you the car you were interested in." Keanu slowly turned to face him, locking eyes with the nervous manager. Richard swallowed hard, struggling to hold his gaze. "Start over?" Keanu repeated, his voice calm but firm. "I don't think you understand. The problem isn't just how you treated me, it's how you treat people. All people." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Keanu took a step back, still looking directly at him. "Respect isn't something you give only to people you think are important. It's not something you bargain with. It's something you should have for everyone, no matter who they are." His words hung in the air, filling the silent room. Richard wanted to reply, but Keanu raised his hand slightly, signaling him to stay silent and listen. "I came here looking for something special, something meaningful, but what I found is something that can't be fixed with an apology. That's why I won't be buying this car. Not from this dealership." Keanu's words were heavy, and Richard seemed to shrink in embarrassment. The employees and customers in the showroom stood still, listening to every word. Keanu turned to leave, but before stepping out, he looked back at Richard and said, "I hope this is a lesson, not just for you, but for everyone here. True luxury isn't a fancy car or a high price tag. True luxury is treating people with respect. And sadly, that seems rarer than any model in this showroom." With that, Keanu walked out, leaving behind a deep silence. The video of this moment spread quickly online. People weren't just talking about the dealership's mistake. They were amazed at how Keanu turned disrespect into a lesson. He became a symbol of humility and quiet strength once again. Instead of buying the car from that dealership, Keanu went to a small family-owned dealership where kindness mattered more than money. The owner, Sam, treated all customers equally, no matter who they were. As soon as Keanu walked in, Sam welcomed him with a warm smile. "How can I help you today?" Sam asked. "I'm looking for something special, a car that stands for something bigger than just luxury." "I think you can help me," Keanu replied. There was no judgment here, only respect and honesty. Keanu bought the car, took a picture with Sam and his team, and posted it online with a simple but powerful caption. "True luxury is being treated with respect. Thank you for reminding me of that." His post went viral again. People loved the message, and soon Sam's dealership became a symbol of good customer service. People from everywhere started visiting, wanting to buy from a place where dignity came first. But Keanu's message did more than just help a dealership. It started a movement. People from all over the world began sharing their own experiences of unfair treatment. Social media was flooded with posts using hashtags like #respect is luxury and #learn from Keanu. Celebrities, activists, and even big brands joined the movement, realizing the power of respect. Luxury car companies started changing their approach, fearing that they could face the same backlash as the dealership in Keanu's story. Meanwhile, the original dealership suffered greatly. Richard was fired after losing many customers and facing public criticism. The dealership tried to fix its reputation, but the damage was already done. It became a warning to businesses everywhere. Treat people with respect or you'll lose everything. Despite all the attention, Keanu stayed humble. "This was never about me," he said in an interview. "It's not about who I am. It's about how we treat each other. Respect shouldn't depend on money or status. Everyone deserves it." When asked what he had learned from the experience, Keanu simply smiled and said, "I've learned that even bad situations can be turned into something good. Respect doesn't cost anything, but when we give it, we create a better world." To take this lesson even further, Keanu decided to auction the car and donate the money to charity. At the event, he gave a short but powerful speech. "This car was just an object before, but now it carries something much more important, the message that we all have the power to inspire change as long as we choose respect." The audience cheered, not just for Keanu, but for the message he shared. What started as an act of disrespect became a story of kindness, learning, and positive change. The world moved on, but the lesson remained. True luxury is not about money. It's about how we treat others. Subscribe my channel.